Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this second meeting to comment on the Gospel of John, the word of the disciple he loved. Let's get started right away. During the 3 years described in the Gospels, when Christ enters into Jesus of Nazareth, incarnates in Jesus of Nazareth, John, under the name of Lazarus, experiences with his own life the end of the ancient mysteries, specifically the Egyptian mysteries of the sentient soul, which by now, as a remnant of the third cultural epoch, had fallen into decay. What Lazarus experiences is the Egyptian microcosmic initiation taking place in the sarcophagus. His apparent death in the sarcophagus has now become a real death, in spite of the ancient Egyptian mysteries. It is as if one of the ancient initiations, the Egyptian ones, had failed. Lazarus is dead, and no hierophant of the ancient Egyptian mysteries could now bring him back to life. The moment when Christ meets Lazarus and raises him back to life from the dead marks the beginning of the new mysteries of the I in the consciousness soul. From this moment on, the hierophant can only be Christ. He raises Lazarus, the initiate of the new mysteries, by means of the Logos or Word, the Word that has returned to being creative. Lazarus, come forth, arise and walk. It means, come out of the tomb of death, get up, stand in the forces of the I, and walk the path that leads to the new mysteries. Thus, Lazarus rises again as John the Evangelist, the eagle, as we have said, who opened his spiritual eyes to see Christ in full waking consciousness. Therefore, Lazarus, John the Evangelist, can be said to be the fulfillment of the mythical story of Isis, Horus, and Osiris. The fact that the Egyptian god Horus, with the head of a falcon, now takes human form, it is John the Evangelist. Horus, the god Pharaoh, born of the union of Osiris and Isis, is now beneath the cross, in human form, as John the Evangelist. Like Horus, who was born to avenge the murder of his father Osiris, killed by his brother Seth, the god of desolation. We saw this in the previous series of lectures on myths and mysteries of Egypt. John the Evangelist has been initiated by Christ to bring into being the Word, which is the complete knowledge of the new mysteries. And he will bring to humanity the testimony of the Logos, defeating the darkness of materialism, just as Horus had defeated Seth and had, let's say, redeemed him. He did not kill him, but placed him as guardian of the serpent of chaos, Apophis, together with the god Ra, thus using his forces of destruction on chaos itself in order to circumvent it. In the same way, the initiation of John the Evangelist will bring testimony of the Logos, which will give the I the strength to redeem evil. Thus Horus, who is the avenger of Osiris, the god with the head of a falcon, and who therefore sees in the spiritual world, also called the god Pharaoh, will become John the Evangelist, the initiate of the eagle, the one whose spiritual eyes look directly at Christ. And just as Horus will turn Seth into a force that stems the chaos of Apophis, In the same way, the testimony brought by John the Evangelist will allow humanity to begin to develop the forces that redeem evil. The Gospel of John opens by touching on the profound mysteries of existence, as we have seen in the prologue, and in this lecture Steiner will again speak of the prologue. To understand this, it is necessary to draw on a spiritual knowledge that is alive and profound, that of anthroposophical spiritual science. In the waking state, human beings are composed of four constituent members, the fourfold occult constitution: the physical body, the etheric or life body, the astral body, and the I, which in human beings are normally all incarnated during their waking state. In this sense, this fourfold occult constitution is integrated as a matryoshka only during wakefulness, because during sleep we know that the astral body and the I separate from the physical and etheric bodies, so that these two, the physical and the etheric, remain in the bed, so to speak, while the other two constituent members move away in their state of consciousness, expanding into the cosmos, into the heavenly spheres. The physical and etheric bodies could not exist on their own and retain the form in which we know them in life, if they were completely abandoned by the other constituent members. Therefore, we must not imagine that once the astral and the I leave, a void is somehow created. Rather, a relative void is created, but one that in turn must be filled by processes that replace the astral and the I. In this lecture, Steiner will come to describe what happens. The occult constitution of man is the result of cosmic evolution, in particular the physical body, which is the most perfect of the bodies we have, of the constituent members we have. This is because the physical body of man, as we perceive it with our external senses, is not a static entity, but is a body in continuous evolution. This continuous evolution is in turn an image of an ancient evolution that is projected into the present. So this process of evolution of the physical body, which has been the longest so far, having originated in ancient Saturn, has taken place until today for the longest time compared to the etheric body, the astral body, and even more so to the I. These evolutionary stages of the bodies also correspond to the evolutionary stages of the Earth, the metamorphosis of the Earth, also called eons, the eons of the Earth or metamorphosis of the Earth, which are the stages of incarnation of the Earth and the cosmos as a whole. Just as human beings are reincarnated in different lives, so too has our planet and our cosmos as a whole undergone various cosmic and planetary incarnations. These previous incarnations, which are cosmic and planetary, are called by the Rosicrucians, and I remind you that the Rosicrucians are a last form of the Church of John the Evangelist, ancient Saturn, ancient Sun, ancient Moon, and the present Earth. Today, we can observe the space that was filled by ancient Saturn when we look at the boundaries of the planet Saturn's sphere, which is the boundary of all current cosmic evolution from Saturn to Vulcan. So, all our cosmic, planetary, and human evolution takes place within the limits of consciousness of the Saturn sphere, which therefore corresponds to ancient Saturn and will therefore correspond to future Vulcan. This is also called the shell of the cosmic egg, because beyond it lies the zodiacal band with the 12 regions of the zodiac. Ancient Sun was smaller because it reached the limits of the current sphere of Jupiter, and in ancient Sun, the Sun we know today as a radiant star underwent its planetary stage. So the present sun, which is a star, carried out what was its previous planetary stage on ancient sun. Ancient moon was smaller yet, reaching the limits of the sphere of Mars. The current moon is a remnant separated from that stage of planetary evolution. So you must imagine that here in these ancient evolutions, the orbits of the planets came into being, and so did the planets themselves, which are, so to speak, the densest element of what was and still is their entire planetary orbit, which in turn is the limit of consciousness of the beings that belong to the evolution of that particular planet. This limit has been shrinking from Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, or ancient Saturn, ancient Sun, ancient Moon. So we can understand how, from an evolutionary point of view, the law of reincarnation operates not only in man in a microcosmic sense, but also on celestial bodies in a macrocosmic sense. Each stage of planetary evolution is separated by an interval of a cosmic night, that is, cosmic days alternating with cosmic nights, which is analogous to the post-mortem life that lies between two human incarnations. The human being incarnates, then experiences death, the passage to the threshold, lives in the post-mortem, and returns in a new incarnation. These two microcosmic processes are equivalent in the macrocosm to the cosmic day, for example, ancient Saturn and the cosmic night that separates ancient Saturn from ancient Sun, for example. So the cosmic day alternates with the cosmic night. In the evolution of ancient Sun, the mineral body of the human being originates. In the warmth of ancient Saturn, Saturn consists of heat. The germ of the physical body of man originates when man is going through its mineral stage. This first physical body, which we can also call phantom, this is its occult name, was clearly different from the current one. This is because it still lacked the etheric, the astral, and the eye. And this original phantom of ancient Saturn, we can also say this original physical spiritual body of ancient Saturn, was an automaton, because it was filled with life, soul, and the divine totally from the outside. It was purely mineral and automatic. All the other constituent members, the etheric and astral bodies and the eye, did not yet exist, or rather, they were still within the hierarchies that would later bestow them. However, they did not yet exist in human beings. In the light of ancient Sun, the etheric body originates when man acquires the plant stage. With the metamorphosis of ancient Saturn into ancient Sun, the etheric body is added to the physical body, so that the physical body of man changes from mineral to vegetative, thus becoming an organism that has life properties within itself. A being that has life properties within itself. At this point, the physical body in ancient Sun has reached the second stage of evolution, the first in ancient Saturn and the second in ancient Sun, and will therefore have a third in ancient Moon, when the germ of the astral body originates and the human being reaches the animal stage, becoming an animal being. On ancient Moon, the astral body is added to the existing constituent members, namely the physical body and the etheric body. At this point, we have the physical body at at its third stage, the etheric body at its second stage, and the astral body at its first stage, at the beginning of its evolution. Only on Earth does the human eye enter. With the present earthly incarnation, the principle of the eye appears, which is not a body. Physical, etheric, and astral are bodies, but the eye is a principle, to be precise. We also call them all subtle bodies to simplify, but the eye is not a body, it is a principle. The eye that is given on earth is given to human beings by the Elohim and goes on to work on the three bodies that had been previously given by the hierarchies. In this way, an individual consciousness is generated. At this point, as the eye begins to work on the astral, etheric, and physical bodies, and the human being takes on the fourfold complexity of its fourfold occult constitution, eye, astral, etheric, and physical. These will gradually differentiate the human being from the other kingdoms, animals, plants, and minerals. They do have aspects in common, which are the bodies, but the eye, beginning to work on the bodies, makes them different. This is because in animals, plants, and minerals, the eye is still working largely from outside. Only in some animals is there a glimmer of this eye that begins to work from within. But in most animals, in all plants, in all minerals, it works from cosmic heights. In animals, it works from the astral world. In plants, from the lower Devakan. And in minerals, from the higher Devakan, which is even more elevated. So, although the human physical body is composed of the same substances as a mineral, of mineral substances, its nature is very different. A mineral, for example, retains its form until it is destroyed from outside, while the human body retains its form only thanks to the presence of the etheric body first and foremost, which maintains it in its life form, but also thanks to the astral and the eye, which manifest through the physical etheric body. When these constituent members separate at death, the human physical body loses its life form and begins to decompose according to the laws of matter. After 3.5 days, the etheric body also separates and dissolves into the cosmic ether or ether of the earth. The astral and the eye will also begin a process of ascension into the celestial spheres, and the astral body a process of purification in the fire of purgatory in the moon sphere. What remains and is passed into the eye are extracts of thinking, feeling, and willing, which we can say are the inner workings of the astral, etheric, and physical bodies. These are transferred as spiritual essence into the eye, which then carries them on into the afterlife after the mineral part of the physical body has decomposed. The etheric body has dissolved into the etheric body of the earth, the cosmic ether, and the astral body has been completely burned in the fire of purgatory. Therefore, this extract of the bodies is permanent and becomes, we can say, a heritage of the eye, which carries it as forces that can express themselves in the next incarnation. When on ancient Saturn the physical body was not yet interpenetrated by the other three bodies, or rather constituent members, human beings were much more similar to a mineral, though today we perceive minerals in everything that is solid, whereas at the time of ancient Saturn, the human being would have been equivalent, more than anything else, to the energy component that holds a crystal together, that is, to the latent heat that lies in the chemical bonds that hold together a mineral or the crystals of a mineral. We must consider that the main difference, for example, between the physical body of a mineral and that of a human being, but this is also true to a certain extent for plants and animals, is that in minerals, the only body that manifests itself in the physical realm is its physical body, while all the other constituent members remain on the outside of it. The difference, therefore, between humans, minerals, and plants is that the higher, more subtle constituent members are all manifested in the physical realm in humans, while in animals, plants, and in particular minerals, they are less manifested. About this, we must take into account the different worlds you see in this image. The physical world is divided into two regions, one called chemical or elemental region, and the other called etheric region, or also etheric world. But this is a misnomer because it is actually part of the physical world, just as the etheric body is one with the physical body. In fact, it holds the physical body together. So the etheric region holds the chemical region of the physical world together. The etheric world is the world of the life processes, of formative forces, of substance, of matter. If we move up, we find the astral world, which is the world of spiritual images, and if we ascend further, we have the spiritual world of Devakan. This is divided into the lower spiritual world, or lower Devakan, also called the world of thought, which is the world of spiritual sounds, the harmony of the spheres. And above it, we have the higher spiritual world, or higher Devakan, called the world of reason, which is the world of spiritual touch. So you have spiritual images in the astral, spiritual sounds in the lower Devakan, and spiritual touch in the higher Devakan. Consequently, as you can also see from this table, the only one among the human, animal, plant, and mineral kingdoms in which all four constituent members are present in the physical world is man. The mineral possesses the four constituent members of its being: the physical body in the physical world, the etheric body in the astral world, the astral body in the lower Devakan, and the group I in the higher Devakan. Why do we see the mineral undergoing the large part of its transformation from the outside? Because in reality, its group I is in a state equivalent to that of a human being in a coma. So we can find the mineral world in the human being when we look at a human being in a coma or in a trance. The plant's four constituents are also distributed into different worlds. Only the etheric and physical bodies are in the physical world, the astral body is in the astral world, and the group I is in the lower Devakan. Consequently, when we look at plants in the human being, we find the plant stage when it is asleep. So plants sleep, and in this sleep they experience the state of inspiration. Just as minerals are in intuition, but in fact this translates into an external coma. They leave intuition because their group I is in the intuitive world, in the higher Devakan. The group I of the plants lives in the lower Devakan, and consequently they experience inspiration in sleep, which manifests itself externally as sleep, as human sleep. If we could see minerals from the inside, we would experience intuition. If we could communicate with their group I, they could do so at the level of intuition, of spiritual touch. If we could communicate with the group I of plants, we would do so through hearing, through spiritual sound, inspiration. For animals, obviously, it's imagination, because animals have a physical, etheric, astral body, all incorporated into the physical world, and a group I in the astral world, and therefore live in a dreamlike state, where their group I in the imagination. So when we develop a certain imagination, we can begin to communicate to a certain degree with animals, inspiration with plants, and intuition with minerals. Obviously, our capacity is greater for imagination, a little less for inspiration, and much less for intuition. It is much easier for us to become attached to and communicate with animals as compared to plants, and even more so to minerals. Nonetheless, it is possible to a certain degree by raising our states of consciousness to higher levels. The main difference with respect to our physical etheric body, especially the physical body, is that astral and etheric bodies are all inside our occult constitution. Therefore, the I is already working internally on the astral body, the etheric body, and the physical body, whereas in the other cases it works from outside as far as the occult constitution is concerned. Thus, at least during the waking state, unlike minerals, human beings manifest all four of their constituent members in the physical world: the physical body, the etheric body, the astral body, and the I. This is why minerals appear dull to us, in a certain sense, at the mercy of the elements on the physical plane, because their higher members reside in the invisible worlds. The majority of their occult constitution is in the invisible worlds. In a certain sense, something similar applies to plants and to a lesser extent to animals. Steiner says that a being who saw only a fingernail, for example, or any part of the human body without the rest of the body, would think that that fingernail is an entity in itself. This is the mineral, if seen only on the physical plane. It is only a small visible part of an invisible whole. We can say that it is a quarter part, because it is only the physical body that manifests itself as a constituent out of four. In the case of plants, we can say that it is half that manifests itself. 2 out of the 4 constituents, just as only a third of the animal remains in the invisible worlds, in the higher worlds. Man instead is a totality that is present in the sense physical world, the visible world in this sense. Therefore, every kingdom, but this also applies to every entity in the hierarchies, is a totality that extends to a certain sense from the sense physical world to the higher worlds. In fact, in the reality that we perceive on the physical plane, but also in the realities of the higher worlds, nothing can exist that is not united to an astral body, an etheric body, and an I, even if these are not manifest in the sense physical world. This is a universal law that there always exists a totalative existence in progressive expression. Every being that we perceive physically, and also those that exist on higher planes, are always on a certain plane, partial manifestations of a whole, of a spiritual totality that extends into the higher worlds. How can we relate to this? For example, by observing the human being in the waking state and in sleep. If we observe man during sleep, we have said that the physical and etheric bodies remain in the bed while the astral and the I separate and rise to the heavenly spheres in other higher states of consciousness. At the same time, Steiner tells us that in reality there is always a totality. Then how is this possible since the astral and the I leave the physical and etheric bodies? In reality, during sleep, the physical and etheric bodies of man are not left in absolute emptiness. Rather, when the astral and the I leave the physical and etheric bodies, spiritual entities of the hierarchies take the place of the astral and the I, filling the physical etheric body from within. So, there are entities that replace the activity of the I and the astral in the etheric physical body. Therefore, there is no void. It is a relative void, in the sense that the astral leaves the physical etheric, but entities that compensate for this void fill it. And at that same time, the physical etheric is never abandoned. It is never alone. When it is not permeated by the human I and the astral, higher spiritual entities perform a compensatory function, which also includes protection and inner work. In fact, they put in order what is usually disordered on the astral level during waking life, and in doing so, they help to repair the etheric body, which in turn repairs the physical body. So, these more evolved entities in which harmony, cosmic harmony, lives, bring harmony into the physical etheric body of the human being when it lies asleep. We are constantly in the company of the entities of the hierarchies that inhabit the spiritual worlds. We are in a spiritual ecology. We are part of a spiritual ecology where entities are constantly working between the higher worlds and the physical world. It is a collaboration between entities of the hierarchies with respect to the human, animal, plant, and mineral kingdoms. The same thing happened in cosmic evolution. when passing from ancient Saturn, Sun, Moon, and Earth, man did not yet have all four constituent members. He was never empty of those parts he did not yet have, as I mentioned before. So, on ancient Saturn, about which we can form an idea by looking at minerals, the etheric, the astral, and the I were withdrawn in higher spiritual entities that filled man from the outside. We can say that in cosmic evolution, the constituents that were given to us were brought out by entities that had guarded them for us until then. Gradually, as the other bodies were added, the etheric on the Sun, the astral on the Moon, and the I on Earth, human beings began to take on the constituent members that were previously, so to speak, reflected by the spiritual entities of the hierarchies, and which they gave then to us. So when the thrones give the physical body on ancient Saturn, this first externalization by the hierarchies, by the thrones, takes place. On ancient Sun, the etheric of man is externalized by the dominions. And on ancient Moon, it is the spirits of movement, the virtues, that externalize the astral body and give it to the occult constitution of man. On Earth, it is the Elohim, spirits of form, who do the same with the I. Therefore, we have spirits of will, spirits of wisdom, spirits of movement, spirits of form, physical, etheric, astral, I. These latter were initially within the hierarchies and subsequently were externalized and given to man. Even when lacking these higher bodies, the human being was constantly filled with entities that guarded them for him. We therefore understand that man has a dual origin, one that we can call individual human and one that we can call cosmic divine. That is, when man is not complete, during sleep he is also not complete because the I and the astral have gone, the spiritual world fills him from within. Thus, man is never an entity that is abandoned, isolated. He is the fruit of a continuous collaboration between this individual human entity and the higher entities, which are cosmic and inhabit the spiritual world. Steiner gives us all this through anthroposophical spiritual science, which counts among its founding currents the Christian esoteric current. Esoteric Christianity, as brought by the Master Jesus Zarathustra, is at the foundation of anthroposophy. Since the beginning of Christianity, there have been an outer teaching and an inner teaching, an exoteric and an esoteric teaching. There was public preaching and at the same time schools of Christian esoteric mysteries. The best known of these schools is that of St. Paul, who, in addition to being a public preacher, founded in Athens the first Christian esoteric school, whose teachings were given only to a select circle. At the head of this school was Dionysius the Areopagite, who is also mentioned, Steiner indicates, in the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 17, verse 34, and is considered the first initiate of esoteric Christianity as a school, we can say. He was the first initiate within an organized school of esoteric Christianity. So, from the influence of the activity of Christ Jesus, a circle of disciples who were more or less directly initiated by having witnessed the life of Christ was born. The first and highest initiate was John the Evangelist himself. And then, in certain and increasingly wider circles, some went out into the world and organized schools. The first of these schools, and also the best known, was that of St. Paul. There, as Steiner writes, the true esoteric Christian spiritual science was cultivated, which was in continuity with ancient wisdom, but completely transformed by Christ, and which will be the foundation for the Anthroposophical spiritual science founded by Rudolf Steiner. So much so that the esoteric school within Anthroposophy will be founded by Master Jesus Zarathustra and Christian Rosenkreuz, the one who allowed Christ to incarnate himself, namely Jesus Zarathustra, and the disciple whom he loved, namely John the Evangelist. Or, in a subsequent incarnation, Christian Rosenkreuz. In the Acts of the Apostles, we find this quotation: I will read to you the passage to which Steiner refers, starting from verse 32. When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some mocked him, while others said, "We will hear you again on this matter." And so Paul left that meeting. Verse 34 says, "But some joined him and became believers, among whom was also Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them." So Dionysius is mentioned as Paul's first esoteric disciple. In this esoteric school, what is known as literature of pseudo-Dionysius was developed, which is the term we find, for example, when we look for information or bibliography about angels, the angelic hierarchies that we know, the 9 angelic choirs. Why is this so? Because this name, Dionysius the Areopagite, was passed on to his disciples, and as a result, not all the books attributed to Dionysius the Areopagite were written by him, but were also written by his disciples using his name. So the so-called pseudo-Dionysius is the collection of all texts that have been preserved and that came out of the initiatory school founded by St. Paul in Athens. There's a question in the chat. Can you repeat the chapter from the Acts of the Apostles? Thank you. It's Acts of the Apostles 17, verse 34. So ancient wisdom was metamorphosed by Christ and cultivated in this esoteric school as well as in other Christian esoteric schools. Consequently, Steiner says the teachings on cosmogony that you know from occult science were also taught in these schools in a form suitable for the time. and indeed there were teachings that corresponded to the hierarchies. The writings of the Pseudo-Dionysius are known to describe the activity of the hierarchies, obviously according to the capabilities and language of the time. In particular, in addition to cosmogony and the spiritual hierarchies, a central role was given to the Christ as the renewer of cosmic, planetary, and human evolution. The human being, in its fourfold occult constitution, physical, etheric, astral, and I, reached completion for the first time in the Lemurian era, as we also know from the previous commentary on myths and mysteries of Egypt. About halfway through the Lemurian era, the I was given by the Elohim, the spirits of form, and infused into human beings, who until then possessed only the first three bodies and were therefore animals in a certain sense. They were animal beings. From the moment the Elohim gave them the I began its evolutionary work through incarnations. It begins to work from within and actively transforms first the astral body and gradually also the etheric and physical bodies, and will do so more and more in the future through successive incarnations. The astral body in particular has been transformed by the I, so much so that this work of the I in the astral body leads to a modification of the sensations, passions, and representations that were originally in the human being. Thus, the astral body is as if it were divided into two parts, one that has remained astral, therefore of an animal nature, so to speak, and one part that has already been transformed by the I, and which we call spiritual self, or in Eastern esotericism, manas. Therefore, one part of the astral body is already transformed into spiritual self, but the spiritual self is not yet mature, not yet complete. Otherwise, the entire astral body would be already transformed. The part of the spiritual self that has already matured is added to the human being's fourfold occult constitution, which becomes, we might say, a fivefold occult constitution, consisting of the physical, etheric, astral, the part that has not yet been transformed, the I, and the spiritual self, that is, the part of the astral body transformed by the I. From this, the symbolic image of man with respect to the work of the number 5 emerges. All the occult work of the number 5 is to bring to full, we can say maturation, the human spirit, that is the spiritual self. From here, for example, arises the image of the pentagram, which is at the same time the image of the 5-pointed star, which is both the archetypal image of the etheric body and the image of the 5 constituent members, including the spiritual self. Thus, when the human being is considered in its present evolution, we can also consider that a part of the spiritual self has already evolved, and therefore that the human being can be, in some ways, even if not totally, a fivefold being. This work of the I begins in the astral and will progress in future evolution in the etheric and also in the physical. Clearly, by transforming the etheric, it will give rise to the buddhi, or life spirit, and then, in transforming the physical body, to the atma, or spirit man. This means that in the end, the 5 constituent members will become 6 with the life spirit and 7 with the spirit man. What happens is that everything that is unconscious in the astral, etheric, and physical realms, i.e., in dreams, sleep, and coma, in the corresponding states of consciousness, will gradually become fully conscious. The I transforms the astral, and the dream becomes conscious. The I transforms the etheric, and sleep becomes conscious. The I transforms the physical, and coma or trance becomes conscious. This becoming conscious of dreams, sleep, and coma also means imagination, inspiration, and intuition. Spiritual image, spiritual hearing and sound, spiritual touch, respectively. Regarding the unconscious, we have a more personal unconscious, which is that of the astral body and refers more to what we are as individuals, as personalities. And then, going into the etheric and the physical, this becomes a much broader unconscious, tending to become more and more a collective unconscious. This is because we have the astral in common with animals, the etheric with plants, and the physical with minerals. So you have to imagine that as we descend deeper and deeper into the unconscious, it becomes wider and wider. The astral unconscious is somewhat smaller because we only share it with animals. The etheric unconscious is already wider because we share it with animals and plants. The physical unconscious is the largest because we share it with animals, plants, and minerals. This has been observed in a, shall we say, empirical way by Freud and Jung as the pioneers of psychotherapy. They went on to study, for example, other states of consciousness. In dreams, for example, symbols often appear in the form of animals and plants, sometimes even minerals. As individual consciousness dissolves, we move towards representations that have only to do with minerals. So, for example, in highly altered states of consciousness, where there is a disintegration of the individual consciousness, we access a collective unconscious that represents only geometric figures similar to those of minerals. This is because the deeper we go into the physical body, the more we move towards the collective. The more we move towards the astral body, the more we move towards something that can also be personal. Personal unconscious and collective unconscious. Obviously, it is a cone that narrows as it moves towards the I, which becomes, in fact, individual. And this unconscious, from being personal, becomes increasingly broader until it becomes totally collective. For our spiritual bodies, there will instead be states of superconsciousness, which we call imagination, inspiration, and intuition. This means that to increasingly broader layers of the unconscious will correspond increasingly higher states of the superconscious, of a more expanded consciousness, imagination, inspiration, and intuition. As for us, until we embark on a path of the I am, the spiritual world will remain part of our unconscious. It will be so until we begin to illuminate our astral body and then the etheric, and then the physical from within through the I. The astral body is what we can call our first battlefield, where the I begins to shine, practicing this shining and transforming the astral substance. As incarnations progress, and with its spiritual evolution, the eye will be able to extend its light, capable of transforming the bodies to the etheric and the physical. What does this correspond to? In addition to the illumination of the unconscious, which becomes superconscious, it also corresponds to the fact that from created beings, we gradually become creator beings. Therefore, in the imagination, we are creators limited to the astral. In inspiration, we will be creators in the astral and in the lower Devakan. And in intuitions, we will be creators in the astral, in the lower Devakan, and in the higher Devakan. Thus, when we complete our evolution as spirit man, we will have acquired creative powers that can act in all three higher worlds. Whereas today, in the eye, we can be, rather than creators, little creative shapers, so to speak, who sometimes come close to creating something new, even though still limited to the etheric physical world. We cannot yet create and project spiritual images outside ourselves. We will do so in future Jupiter when we are angels. We cannot yet produce cosmic harmonies and spiritual sounds. We will do so when we are archangels in future Venus. We cannot yet produce spiritual beings. We will do so when we are man arche in future Vulcan. Therefore, the fulfillment of human, planetary, and cosmic evolution is to arrive at a totally spiritualized occult constitution. Then our entire astral body will be spiritual self. Our entire etheric body will be life spirit, and our entire physical body will be spirit man. Manas, Buddhi, Atma, which we can also call the Trinity in man. Manas being the Holy Spirit in man, Buddhi the Son in man, and Atma the Father in man. These also correspond to future Jupiter, future Venus, and future Vulcan. I read that there is a message. Okay, the audio is gone. Can you all hear me? Okay. At the end of evolution, the eye will be completely infused and active in each of the bodies, and we will become completely responsible for our evolution, because it also follows that as long as it was the spiritual hierarchies that filled us from the inside out, we were not responsible for that evolution. The hierarchies were. But when the eye enters and works on the bodies from within, it gradually relieves the corresponding hierarchies of their work in those bodies. Let me give you an example. The eye working on the astral body, making it spiritual, gradually frees the guardian angel from guarding our spiritual self. So when the eye has completely transformed the astral body into the spiritual self, the guardian angel will have fulfilled its mission and will be free, becoming an archangel. This also applies to the etheric body and the physical body, to the entities that take care of the etheric body and the physical body. Angels, archangels, archaea, and other entities that are connected to those bodies. Obviously, we are talking about arcs that gradually expand with evolution. The first arc that interests us is that of the third hierarchy, i.e., angels, archangels, and archaea. So already today, the totality of the spiritual self is present in the astral body. The totality of the life spirit is present in the etheric body, and the totality of the spirit man is present in the physical body. But these three spirits are deeply embedded within those bodies, as if they were seeds placed very deep inside, and so they remain in the unconscious state. However, especially starting from the astral body, they can be brought to germination. And this has already been done in part with the spiritual self. When this seed has completely germinated and the plant has become adult, so to speak, everything that was unconscious in the astral, etheric, and physical bodies will have been brought to full consciousness and become the superconscious states of imagination, inspiration, and intuition. Consequently, the hierarchies that were responsible for carrying out those tasks, which corresponded to imagination, inspiration, and intuition, and that were still submerged in the unconscious for us, will be freed, and they will be able to evolve in turn. So the angel becomes an archangel, the archangel an archaea, and the archaea an Eloah, a spirit of form. From this we understand that there is collaboration between spiritual hierarchies, man and the kingdoms of nature, but fundamentally, the being who now has the responsibility to take on the task of leading its own evolution is man. As a consequence, animals, plants, and minerals, seeing man take responsibility for his own spiritual guidance and evolution, will do the same by reflection. In this way, the corresponding hierarchies can go on to perform other tasks, other higher tasks. On ancient Saturn, man came into being as a mineral, and this manifests today by the fact that we occupy space on Earth. We are endowed with a solid physical body that occupies space. On ancient Sun, we became plants, being endowed with the life that allows us to grow and reproduce, with an internal physiology. On ancient Moon, we became animals, and thus capable of pleasure and pain, internal movement, but also of movement in space, external movement, and of expressing our inner world. At the beginning of the present Earth, therefore, the physical, etheric, and astral bodies were an image of all past evolution. Saturn, Sun, and Moon condensed. This was true in particular in the middle of the Lemurian era, which is a recapitulation of ancient Moon. It is, we might say, an image of the totality of ancient evolution. The physical body was the fourth evolution, Saturn, Sun, Moon, Earth, and is the most evolved body even today. The etheric body was at its third evolution, Sun, Moon, Earth, and the astral body at its second evolution, Moon and Earth. On Earth, midway through the Lemurian era, there was not yet a human I at the beginning. Rather, the Elohim filled man from outside with a divine I that poured from outside into man, filling him from the outside in. Then, halfway through the Lemurian era, the Elohim gave a drop of the substance of their own I and infused it into the human being. From that moment on, the possibility of manifesting as individual I began. Obviously, at first, it is a potentiality that is gradually brought to expression. So everything we see and call physical body is actually an overlay, like a Matryoshka doll. It radiates through the physical body, which is made up of solids, liquids, gases, and heat, the etheric, the astral, and the I. The physical body, as we usually understand it, is only a facade perceptible to the senses, because within it, through it, the entire fourfold occult constitution manifests itself. Those hierarchies that operate within the bodies, as long as we cannot take full responsibility for their evolution, permeate the bodies with their corresponding spirits. Therefore, the physical body of man is permeated by entities that carry within a divine spirit man. The etheric body is permeated by entities that carry within it a divine life spirit. And the astral body is also permeated by those entities that carry within it a divine spiritual self, except for that part that has already been transformed by the human I, and which we can say is already a human spiritual self. Summarizing, we have a human spiritual self plus the part that is not yet transformed, which is a divine spiritual self, a divine life spirit, a divine spirit man. But precisely because these are guarded by higher entities, for us, they are still part of what is unconscious. As the I works from within on the bodies, they will become superconscious, imagination, inspiration, and intuition. So when during the night the physical and etheric bodies remain in bed and the astral and I expand outwards, the entities of the hierarchies bring in their spirit man and their life spirit, and also their divine spiritual self. What is missing is always filled by entities from the hierarchies. In particular, this spirit man, this life spirit, and the spiritual self are linked through relationships to those same hierarchies that had operated in the corresponding ancient evolutions. Thrones and archai are linked to the physical body. Dominions and archangels to the etheric body. Virtues and angels to the astral body. Do you remember, in ancient evolution, there is a creative hierarchy, for example, the thrones, and a hierarchy that is generated and passes into its human stage. So, in ancient Saturn, these are the thrones and the archai. With the sacrifice of the thrones, the physical body of man is generated, and the archai become human. In ancient Sun, the dominions give the germ of the etheric body to man, and the archangels shine as they pass to their human stage. In ancient Moon, the virtues renounce part of their astral body and give it as the astral body of man. The angels become human and man becomes animal. So there are higher hierarchies, thrones, dominions, and virtues who work together with the third hierarchy, respectively the archangels, and angels, to operate within the corresponding bodies of man, and so you will understand that the Elohim take care of the eye. Every night, when the eye reaches the sphere of the sun, the Elohim remind man of his heavenly origin when he was in the state of the earthly paradise in the middle of the Lemurian era. We say that, in a sense, they remind him that we are their children, that we are the children of the Elohim, and that we have our original spiritual home on the sun. All this also means, as Steiner already mentioned in the previous lecture, that in ancient evolution, man could not yet express outwardly as speech what he experienced inwardly. Speech as an expression of the human soul, of its microcosmic inner life, was only given during the present Earth evolution. Animals, even though they make sounds, do not have this faculty of manifesting their inner microcosmic, i.e. individual, world. For the sound they make is a collective divine expression of their group I. Sometimes, certain animals that have been domesticated, for example, and other animals that have other social abilities, have a greater capacity to express their individual inner life. But this is not generally the case, and at any rate, at a much lower level than humans in terms of breath, so to speak. So, the faculty of speech. The faculty of speech is not something that has evolved from below in an accidental way. It is the embodiment of the original Logos that has set creation in motion. It is the Logos that created humans with the potential capacity to express the Logos itself, the Word. And it expresses itself in a certain sense, even if not fully, in minerals, plants, and animals, and fully in man. Steiner makes this comparison, saying that just as the flower is already in the seed, so the speaking human being is already in germ in the early cosmic phases of ancient Saturn, the human being who can express itself through speech. Because the human physical body, in its form and function, is already an expression of the Logos. So, it is not simply a material body. Its origin and form have been shaped by the Logos, by the divine word. And it has been structured in a preordained way, so that one day the word could spring from it, which is the direct expression of the Logos that created it. We can say that the body is a witness to the Logos. It is the sensible and visible manifestation of the invisible Logos. The Logos acts in the physical body of man, both during wakefulness and in sleep. When the eye and the astral body leave the body during sleep, the Logos or divine word continues to operate in the physical and etheric bodies. The human physical body, therefore, is not a material shell, but is the temple in which the Logos can express itself. And the Word is a creative force capable of communication that unites man with the divine. In the cosmic evolution of ancient Saturn, man has only the physical body, which is therefore an automaton permeated by the Logos, and is a direct expression of the Logos. In ancient Sun, the etheric body is added and is so animated by a divine life spirit, and the Logos becomes life. The physical body is no longer an automaton, but has been enlivened from within. In ancient Moon, the astral body is inserted, which is the body of light, the spiritual light, and here life is illuminated from within, becoming light. On earth, the I is added, which is the principle of self-awareness. This allows man to observe himself and the world, to gradually detach himself and assert free choice. At this point, man becomes a being capable not only of making a choice, but even of opposing the Logos, transforming spiritual reality into material reality. When the I enters the occult structure in the middle of the Lemurian era, the Luciferic spirits enter the astral body. At that moment, the I consciousness that is totally united with the Elohim who generated it, totally immersed in this divine bliss of heavenly union with the Elohim, turns outward. From that moment on, the world that was perceived in its spiritual reality is perceived in its outer material reality. All perception is externalized, and it is said, "Your eyes will be opened." The eyes to the outside were opened with the entrance of Luciferic spirits. To be opposed to the Logos, then, means also to make the spiritual reality material, the inner reality external. Thanks to the I, man acquired the faculty not only to live in light and life, but to observe all this from the outside and to oppose the Logos, life and light, through darkness, which is the negation of light, life, and the Logos. Through this, everything that was previously spiritual became material for man, who began to attain material existence. So the Logos is not only the origin of the human physical body, but acts as a spiritual and creative force that runs through the entire cosmic, planetary, and human evolution. The Word is placed at the center, at the heart of creation, and is the source from which the human being derives the ability to express oneself, and the human I is added in earthly evolution. The I allows man to become aware of himself, to have self-consciousness and of the world, but at the same time makes him feel separate and in some way opposed to the divine. Thus, the first words of the Gospel, "In the beginning was the Word," and then the entire prologue, according to the Christian esoteric school, are in reality an esoteric description of cosmic, planetary, and human evolution. And the Logos is also understood as the archetype of the human physical body from which the entire human being will develop. It is the foundation of everything created, and it is the first principle from which reality takes shape. On Saturn, there was only man. On the Sun, the animal kingdom appeared. On the Moon, the plant kingdom. And on the Earth, the mineral kingdom. So on ancient Saturn, there was only man. On ancient Sun, the animal kingdom appeared, which remained behind first. On ancient Moon, the plant kingdom, which lagged behind too. And on Earth, the mineral kingdom, which is the first to appear physically. This order is the opposite of what is described by the natural sciences, which in general terms say that the first to appear is the mineral kingdom, then the plant kingdom, the animal, and finally man. But if we look at it from a spiritual point of view, we see a reversal of evolution, or rather, the sense-physical evolution is a reversal of spiritual evolution. So initially, everything is man, then animals originate, then plants, and then minerals. When minerals arise physically, evolution is reversed and plants begin to appear physically, animals physically, and man physically. Gradually, what had originally evolved spiritually appears in reverse. In the beginning was the Logos, which was the archetype of the human physical body, and it was the foundation of everything created. All animals, plants, and minerals originated later. On Saturn, nothing of all this really existed except man, says Steiner. On the Sun, the animal kingdom was added, on the Moon, the plant kingdom, and on Earth, the mineral kingdom. On the Sun, the Logos became life. On the Moon, it became light. And all this was before man, when man was endowed with the I. On ancient Saturn, the Logos was the original presence in the physical body. On the Sun, it became life, that is, the etheric body, which is the body of life. And on the Moon, it became light, the astral body, which is the body of light. Finally, this light dwells in the human astral body and must be recognized and conquered by the human I. What does this mean? It means that human existence on Earth acquires meaning only insofar as human beings choose to commit themselves to overcoming the inner darkness, which is ignorance and the darkness of materiality. We can also say selfishness and materialism, in another sense, Luciferic and Ahrimanic spirits. These are the opponents of the Christ, of the Logos. So by overcoming inner darkness, ignorance, and darkness of materiality, or if you like, selfishness and materialism, luciferic and Ahrimanic spirits, these are all different ways of speaking of the same process, we recognize the inner light of the Logos, the Christ within us. The spiritual path of esoteric Christianity, like that of the Anthroposophical spiritual science, is a path of inner knowledge that awakens to varying degrees our inner divine light, the Logos. We have come to an end, and all this is contained in a sublime way in the words of the prologue to the Gospel of John. These are, says Steiner, an expression of a spiritual science proper to esoteric Christianity in the time immediately after Golgotha that arises from experience, just as Lazarus, whom Christ raised from the dead, initiating him in the new mysteries. So where does the prologue come from? From Lazarus' experience of having been raised from the dead as John the Evangelist by Christ as his hierophant, thus ending the ancient mysteries and beginning the new mysteries. In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God, and he was in the beginning with God. All things were made through it, and without it nothing was made that has been made. And in it was life, and the life became the light of men, and the light shone in the darkness, but the darkness did not comprehend it. And consequently, Steiner says, in the continuation of the Gospel of John, it is said how little by little darkness comes to understand light and is transformed by it. So initially there is opposition and misunderstanding, and then the light, working from within darkness, begins to transform it into colors, into new light that is colors. In this, the evolution of man is also situated clearly in that when the eye enters the constitution of the astral, etheric, and physical bodies, there's a large part of ignorance and darkness. As the eye works on it, this darkness is tinged with the colors of the soul. Thus, the soul, with the union of the light of the eye and the unconscious darkness present in the astral, etheric, and physical bodies, becomes the colors of the soul. Therefore, any path that leads the ego to work on introspection, on inner evolution, an esoteric path that works to bring the eye to shine in the astral, etheric, and physical bodies, our three unconscious dimensions, will make the colors of the soul shine more and more. And with this, I conclude the second meeting, and thank you.